Vad säger ni, vill ni sjunga in 2 nya låtar? Och de sa ja. Så jag blev lite överraskad av det. Och så kom de.
Behind ABBA's timeless melodies lies a genius who has always chosen silence. But that silence has lasted for nearly half a century. Now, at the age of 78, Benny Andersson unexpectedly breaks the wall of secrecy and officially confirms a truth that leaves the world stunned. What fans once whispered and speculated has now become reality. And the biggest question arises, could this be the final piece to fully understand the legend of ABBA? Before the world came to know him as one of the great architects of pop music, Benny Andersson was simply a boy from Stockholm, born in December 1946 into a modest working-class family. There was nothing at first glance that suggested he would one day help define the sound of a generation. Yet, even in those early years, music pulsed through his life like a hidden current waiting to surface. His father and grandfather, both amateur musicians, placed an accordion in his hands when he was still a child. That instrument, heavy and unwieldy for such a young boy, became his first true companion. While other children were content with games in the streets, Benny was captivated by the way notes could transform into melodies under his fingers. It was an obsession that hinted at the extraordinary career that lay ahead. By his teenage years, Andersson had already shown an uncanny gift for both melody and arrangement. He had an ear for musical detail that set him apart, sensing how even a small shift in chord progression could alter the entire mood of a song. In 1964, at just 18 years old, he joined a local rock group that would prove to be his first real platform, the Heep Stars. Known in Sweden as the Swedish Beatles, the band enjoyed a fervent fan base and represented the country's own answer to the global rock explosion sweeping across Europe and America. For Andersson, this was not merely a chance to perform. It was the crucible in which he would hone his craft. As the keyboardist and a rising creative force within the Heep Stars, Andersson quickly distinguished himself. He was not content with simply playing songs written by others. He wanted to create, to experiment, to shape a sound that was uniquely their own. Before long, he began contributing original compositions that resonated deeply with audiences. Tracks like Sunny Girl revealed his ability to weave infectious hooks with emotional depth, qualities that would later become hallmarks of his style. Through the Heep Stars, Benny Andersson discovered the transformative power of songwriting, the realization that music could both capture and define an era. Yet, perhaps more importantly, his time with the Heep Stars placed him on a collision course with destiny. The Swedish pop scene of the 1960s was vibrant but close-knit, and it was within this world that Andersson would encounter other musicians who shared his vision and ambition. These connections would ultimately lead to the formation of one of the most iconic groups in music history, a band whose legacy would stretch far beyond the borders of Sweden. What makes Andersson's early story compelling is not simply the chronology of events, but the contrast between his humble beginnings and the magnitude of what he would achieve. Here was a young man, raised without privilege, shaped by the sounds of an accordion in a family living room, who would later craft melodies sung and cherished by millions across the globe. His journey illustrates the unpredictability of talent. It can emerge anywhere, from any background, provided there is passion to fuel it and discipline to refine it. The next great turning point in Benny Andersson's life arrived in 1966 when fate introduced him to Björn Ulvaeus. At first, it was simply two ambitious young musicians crossing paths in Sweden's close-knit pop landscape. Yet the moment they began to play together, it was evident that something extraordinary was happening. Benny's instinct for harmony and melody blended effortlessly with Björn's knack for clever, emotionally resonant lyrics. What emerged was not merely collaboration, but a rare form of creative symbiosis. Two minds able to anticipate and elevate each other's ideas in ways that neither could achieve alone. In the following years, that partnership deepened, and soon it expanded. Both men had relationships with two exceptional singers, Agnetha Fältskog, who was already making waves as a solo artist, and Annie Frid Lyngstad, known to fans as Frida, whose voice carried a distinctive warmth and power. When the four of them began to experiment with performing together, there was an almost alchemical reaction. Their voices intertwined in harmonies that seemed effortless yet complex, crystalline yet full of emotion. It was clear that this was no ordinary quartet. By 1972, they had officially formed a group, though finding a name proved a challenge. Eventually, they chose the simple yet iconic solution of combining their initials, Agnetha, Björn, Benny, and Anni Frid, into a single word, ABBA. What might have seemed like a playful shorthand would, within just a few years, become one of the most recognizable names in music history. Their early efforts met with modest success in Sweden, but international breakthrough was still elusive. That changed in 1974 when ABBA entered the Eurovision Song Contest with a song that would become their calling card, Waterloo. Dressed in flamboyant costumes that captured the spirit of glam rock, they delivered a performance that was as theatrical as it was musically irresistible. The song, with its upbeat tempo and infectious chorus, swept to victory, winning the competition and catapulting ABBA onto the world stage. In that moment, the world discovered not just another pop act, but the vanguard of a new era. Waterloo marked the beginning of a golden age in popular music, and ABBA stood at its center. Their songs traveled across borders with ease, transcending language and culture. Audiences from London to Sydney, from New York to Tokyo, found themselves humming along to melodies that felt at once fresh and timeless. Behind the dazzling performances and the radiant voices of Agnetha and Frida, however, was Benny Andersson's singular contribution. If Björn was the wordsmith, crafting lyrics that were clever, poignant, and often tinged with irony, Benny was the architect of sound. He brought to ABBA a meticulous attention to musical structure, a composer's sensibility that lifted their work above the ordinary. His arrangements were layered, precise, and full of surprising textures, from Baroque-inspired keyboard flourishes to driving disco rhythms. Yet perhaps Benny's greatest gift was his ability to infuse pop with depth. Critics often spoke of the Swedish melancholy hidden within ABBA's glittering exterior, and it was Benny who wove that thread into the fabric of their songs. Beneath the bright hooks of hits like Dancing Queen or Mamma Mia lay a subtle undercurrent of longing, a bittersweet note that made the music linger long after the final chord. This emotional duality, the sparkle of joy overlaying the shadow of sadness, was what made ABBA's sound so distinctive and unforgettable. The group's ascent was meteoric. By the late 1970s, ABBA had become a global phenomenon, selling millions of records and dominating charts around the world. Their concerts drew massive crowds, their albums became instant bestsellers, and their influence extended into fashion and culture. Yet behind the scenes, the process remained deeply collaborative, with Benny at the piano, sketching out melodies that would form the skeletons of songs destined for immortality. He had an uncanny ability to find progressions that felt inevitable, yet surprising. Harmonies that seemed simple but revealed new depths with each listen. As their fame grew, so did the complexity of their music. Benny pushed boundaries in production, exploring new technologies and studio techniques that gave ABBA's recordings a polish few could match. He was a perfectionist, often spending long hours refining the smallest details of a track until it achieved exactly the effect he envisioned. This dedication paid off. Even decades later, ABBA's music retains a freshness and clarity that continues to resonate with new generations of listeners. But Benny's role was not only technical. He was also the emotional anchor of the group, channeling his own experiences and the cultural sensibilities of Sweden into compositions that spoke to universal themes: love, heartbreak, joy, and regret. In doing so, he ensured that ABBA was never just another pop act chasing trends. Instead, they became storytellers of human emotion, capturing both the ecstasy of romance and the ache of its loss with equal authenticity. For all their glittering success, ABBA's story was never just about triumph. Behind the sequined costumes and the euphoric choruses lay a more fragile reality, one that grew increasingly difficult to conceal as the years went on. By the late 1970s, the cracks beneath the surface were beginning to widen. Fame had brought wealth and adoration, but it had also magnified the personal strains within the group. And because ABBA was not just a band, but also two married couples, those strains soon turned heartbreakingly personal. In 1979, Björn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog announced their divorce. To fans, it seemed almost unthinkable. The golden couple whose voices had soundtracked love stories around the world were now living through their own unraveling. Yet, in a twist of irony that only deepened the poignancy of their music, the group continued to record together. Songs such as The Winner Takes It All blurred the lines between performance and confession, transforming personal pain into universal art. Agnetha herself later admitted that singing those lyrics, penned by Björn, was one of the most emotionally challenging moments of her career. Yet it gave the world one of ABBA's most enduring classics. Just a few years later, history repeated itself. Benny Andersson and Annie Fried Lyngstad, whose marriage had also been a foundation of the group, announced their separation. By the early 1980s, ABBA was no longer a quartet bound by both love and music, but four individuals navigating the aftershocks of broken relationships. While they remained committed to their craft, the emotional toll was undeniable. Listeners could hear the shift in tone. The buoyant exuberance that had defined their 1970s hits gave way to darker, more introspective textures. Nowhere was this transformation clearer than in their final studio album, The Visitors, 1981. From its haunting opening track to its layered, atmospheric production, the album was unlike anything ABBA had released before. Gone were the carefree melodies of Mamma Mia or Take a Chance on Me. In their place stood songs steeped in melancholy and maturity, exploring themes of isolation, regret, and the passage of time. Critics praised its sophistication, but for fans, it felt like a bittersweet farewell, a glimpse into the band's internal struggles rendered through music. What made this period particularly striking was the lack of theatrics in ABBA's decline. There was no grand announcement of disbandment, no farewell tour packed with teary goodbyes. Instead, the band simply stopped. After completing promotional duties in 1982, they quietly walked away from the spotlight. One by one, the members pursued individual projects, leaving behind a silence that was almost deafening. For millions of fans around the world, it was as if ABBA had vanished overnight. This quiet exit was in stark contrast to their spectacular rise. At their peak, ABBA had been everywhere, on record players in living rooms, on stages in front of packed arenas, on television screens broadcasting Eurovision glory. Their music had become woven into the fabric of daily life across continents. And yet, in the end, there was no closing chapter, no final curtain call to give fans closure. That absence left a void that would linger for decades. For Benny Andersson, the dissolution of ABBA was both an ending and a beginning. The years of intense collaboration, the highs of international fame, and the personal lows of divorce had left their mark. Yet they had also forged him into an artist unafraid of vulnerability. While the public grieved the disappearance of their beloved band, Benny himself quietly turned toward new creative horizons, determined not to let the story of his music end with ABBA's silence. Still, the shadow of the breakup loomed large. To this day, fans debate what might have been if the group had stayed together a little longer. If the fractures of love and fame could have been mended, if the melancholic brilliance of the Visitors hinted at an even greater artistic evolution cut short. Instead, the world was left with a legacy both dazzling and incomplete, a discography filled with joy and heartbreak, capped not by a triumphant finale but by an unresolved ellipsis. For more than 4 decades, the silence surrounding ABBA's breakup became almost as legendary as the music itself. Fans speculated endlessly. Had the divorces created irreparable fractures? Did the crushing weight of global fame suffocate the joy of creation? Or was there an unseen artistic clash that made the group's future impossible? The mystery endured, wrapped in rumor and longing, until, at last, Benny Andersson himself spoke with rare candor. In a series of reflections shared between 2024 and 2025, Benny finally confirmed what many had suspected, but few dared to articulate aloud. The end of ABBA was not born of scandal, betrayal, or secret feuds. It was, in truth, far simpler, and perhaps more human. "We were exhausted," he admitted. "The whirlwind of constant touring, The relentless demand for new hits, the glare of international stardom combined with the private heartbreak of failed marriages, had drained the group's spirit. Inspiration, once abundant, had become elusive. By 1982, the fuel that had powered ABBA's meteoric rise was simply gone. This revelation struck a chord with fans. It painted a picture not of glamorous stars consumed by drama, but of four ordinary people who had given everything to their art until there was nothing left to give. The honesty carried a bittersweet weight. No hidden villain, no dark conspiracy, just the quiet tragedy of burnout. After the disbandment, each member ventured into a new chapter. Annie Fried Lyngstad, Frida, embraced a life far removed from the pop spotlight, eventually becoming a princess through her marriage to a German nobleman. Yet even that fairy tale existence was touched by sorrow when she endured the devastating loss of her daughter. Agnetha retreated into a more private world, occasionally returning with solo work but largely shielding herself from the public gaze. Björn pursued projects in songwriting and stage productions. For Benny, the journey never strayed far from the piano. Music remained his anchor, though the form it took evolved. He immersed himself in composition, co-creating ambitious musicals such as Chess with Björn and Tim Rice, a project that revealed his ability to weave pop sensibilities with the grandeur of classical arrangements. Later came Kristina från Duvemåla, a sweeping Swedish-language musical that underscored his deep roots in orchestration and storytelling. These works reinforced what ABBA had already proven. Benny Andersson was not just a pop hitmaker, but a composer of remarkable range and depth. Yet, even as new projects unfolded, the shadow of ABBA never disappeared. Fans continued to hope for a reunion, a return, some moment when the four voices would blend again. For years, those hopes were met with polite refusals. The past, it seemed, was a chapter closed. Then, in 2018, the impossible happened. ABBA announced they had recorded new material together. The world erupted with astonishment. After nearly 4 decades of silence, Benny, Björn, Agnetha, and Frida were back in the studio, not as nostalgic relics, but as artists reclaiming their bond. This spark of revival culminated in 2021 with Voyage, their first album in 40 years. The record was both a time capsule and a revelation, at once steeped in the familiar DNA of ABBA's golden era and enriched by the maturity of lived experience. Songs carried the shimmer of old melodies, but with a reflective tone, as if acknowledging the passage of time while proving that artistry knows no expiration date. Even more astonishing was the launch of the ABBA Voyage concert in London, a groundbreaking technological spectacle in which digital avatars of the band performed alongside a live orchestra. Fans who had once danced to Dancing Queen in the 1970s found themselves transported back, while younger generations witnessed the magic for the first time. It was not just nostalgia, but a bold experiment in how music and technology could preserve and even extend the life of a cultural phenomenon. And at its heart was Benny Andersson, whose fingerprints on the arrangements and sound ensured that the experience remained authentically ABBA. Now, at 78, Benny's reflections carry the weight of both history and renewal. By admitting that exhaustion, not scandal, ended ABBA, he offered closure to millions who had wondered for so long. But by standing once more on the world stage, through new music, through technological innovation, through the timeless power of those harmonies, he also demonstrated something larger. ABBA's story was never truly over. It had simply paused, waiting for the right moment to resume. In Benny's words and actions, one finds a paradox that defines ABBA itself. They were fragile yet enduring, finite yet eternal. The exhaustion that once ended their journey has given way to a revival that bridges generations. And if time has softened their voices, it has only sharpened the truth. ABBA's music is immortal, as fresh today as it was when 4 young Swedes first conquered Eurovision with Waterloo. For Benny Andersson, the boy from Stockholm who once clutched an accordion with childlike wonder, this full-circle moment is more than vindication. It is proof that inspiration, though it may falter, can always return. And as long as the world continues to sing along, ABBA, and Benny's music, will never fade. ABBA's legacy today stretches far beyond music charts, record sales, or concert attendance figures. They are not merely a band that enjoyed success during the 1970s and 1980s. They became a cultural phenomenon, etched permanently into the soundtrack of countless lives. Their songs are not just melodies, but time capsules, each carrying with it the warmth of youth, the thrill of discovery, and the bittersweet ache of memory. To hear Dancing Queen is to be transported instantly to a place of joy, where the dance floor feels endless. To listen to the winner, Takes It All is to stand face to face with heartbreak distilled into song. And through it all, the fingerprints of Benny Andersson's musical genius remain unmistakable. The revelation he shared at age 78 does more than resolve an old mystery. It humanizes the myth. For decades, fans wrestled with the question, how could a group at the height of their power simply walk away? Now, the answer is disarmingly simple. They walked away because they were human, exhausted, heartbroken, and searching for peace beyond the endless spotlight. In admitting this, Benny offered a truth that resonates deeply. Even legends must sometimes step back to preserve themselves. And yet, the paradox of ABBA is that their music never stepped back. Even during the decades of silence, their songs lived on. Through radio broadcasts, movie soundtracks, karaoke nights, weddings, and reunions among friends. Their melodies bridged generations, uniting grandparents, parents, and children under the same irresistible rhythms. What other pop group can claim such enduring relevance, such emotional universality? Today, the resurgence of ABBA through Voyage and the groundbreaking ABBA Voyage concert proves something profound. While the members may have aged, while fatigue may once have silenced them, the spirit of their music remains ageless. It reminds us that art, when born from authenticity, survives long after the moment of its creation. ABBA's songs do not belong to the past. They belong to every listener who sings along in the present and to every generation yet to come. And so, as this chapter closes, the invitation opens. If you have ever lost yourself in the shimmer of Dancing Queen, or found solace in the aching beauty of The Winner Takes It All, this is your moment to reconnect. Share your stories, your memories, your first encounters with ABBA's music, because together, these shared experiences form the true legacy of the band. Not just records sold or awards won, but the emotions they stirred in millions of hearts. So, we turn to you. What does ABBA mean in your life? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe, as we do, that the stories of music's greatest legends deserve to be told and retold, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll join us on our journey through the hidden chapters and timeless legacies of the artists who shaped the soundtrack of the world. Because ABBA may have once paused their story, but the music and the memories will live forever.